Have you ever been in a relationship where everything felt perfect and then suddenly, without warning, the warmth disappeared? The person who once couldn't wait to see you now seems distant, detached, almost like a stranger. Or maybe you're the one who's gone cold and you can't even explain why. You still care, you still love them, but something inside you has shut down. This isn't about falling out of love. It's not about boredom or losing interest. It's about something much deeper, much more hidden, and honestly, much more painful. Because when we go cold on our partners, it's not because we've stopped loving them. It's because we've stopped feeling safe. Let's talk about what really happens when relationships lose their warmth and why the people we love the most can sometimes hurt us in ways that seem completely insignificant to everyone else. Think back to when you first met your partner. Remember that feeling? Everything they said was fascinating. Every story, every joke, every mundane detail about their day felt important. You could watch the same movie together 100 times and never get bored. You wanted to know everything about them, their childhood, their dreams, their favorite breakfast cereal, everything. But then something shifts. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, that fascination begins to fade. The stories you once found captivating now feel repetitive. The quirks you found endearing start to irritate you. And worst of all, you feel guilty about it. Because you know you still love this person, so why does everything they do suddenly bother you? Here's what most people get wrong.
They think this coldness comes from familiarity, from knowing someone too well, from the relationship becoming predictable. But that's not the real story. The real story is about hurt. Small hurts, invisible hurts, the kind of hurts that seem too trivial to mention. Imagine this scenario. Your partner is telling you about something that happened at work. You're tired, you're scrolling through your phone, and you give them a distracted, without really listening. To you, it's nothing, you're just tired. But to them, it lands differently. It whispers something dangerous. You don't care about me anymore. I'm not important to you. I'm boring you. They don't say anything. How could they? It sounds ridiculous to say, you hurt me because you looked at your phone while I was talking. So they swallow it. They tell themselves they're being oversensitive. They try to shake it off. But here's the thing about small hurts. They accumulate. One distracted conversation becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes a pattern. Each time, the wound gets a little deeper. Each time, they pull back a little more. And before either of you realize it, they've gone cold. And here's the really confusing part. When someone goes cold, they often can't even articulate why. If you ask them what's wrong, they genuinely might not know. Because these aren't big, dramatic betrayals. These are paper cuts. And nobody goes to therapy because of a paper cut. But 1,000 paper cuts? That can make you bleed out emotionally. Let's get even more specific, because this is where it gets really interesting. There's a part of us that exists in relationships that isn't our adult self. It's our child self, the part of us that loves deeply, innocently, without logic or reason. And that child self doesn't operate by adult standards. Your adult self knows that your partner being late to dinner because of traffic isn't a rejection. But your child self hears something else entirely. They don't prioritize me. I'm not worth being on time for. They don't really want to be here. Your adult self knows that your partner choosing what to watch on TV isn't a power struggle, but your child self remembers every time someone dismissed your preferences, every time your opinion didn't matter, every time you had to shrink yourself to keep the peace. This is why seemingly insignificant things in relationships can trigger such disproportionate emotional responses. It's why someone can get genuinely upset because their partner changed their phone wallpaper. It's why a forgotten good morning text can ruin someone's entire day. It's why not getting enough interest in the details of a lunch break can feel like emotional abandonment. And the really tragic part, both people in the relationship are often completely confused by what's happening. The person who's gone cold feels guilty and ashamed. They know logically that these things shouldn't bother them. They know their partner isn't intentionally trying to hurt them. So they hide their feelings. They try to be mature. They tell themselves they're being ridiculous. And with each suppressed hurt, they become a little more distant, a little more numb, a little more cold. The person on the receiving end of the coldness is equally confused and hurt. They can sense something's wrong, but they don't know what. They ask, "What's wrong?" and get nothing as an answer.
They try to be affectionate and get stonewalled. They feel like they're living with a stranger who looks like their partner but acts like they can barely tolerate being in the same room. And here's what makes it even worse. The colder one person becomes, the more the other person tends to react in ways that confirm all those hidden fears. Maybe they become clingy, desperate for reassurance. Maybe they become critical, frustrated by the distance. Maybe they shut down too, creating even more space. And the cycle continues, both people moving further apart while simultaneously wanting to be close. So what actually breaks this cycle? What brings warmth back into a relationship that's gone cold? The answer sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things to do. Communication. But not just any communication. We're talking about vulnerable, embarrassing, I sound like a 5-year-old saying this, kind of communication. Because here's what needs to happen. That person who's gone cold needs to be able to say things that sound completely absurd out loud. Things like, "I felt hurt when you scrolled on your phone while I was talking." Things like, "It bothered me that you picked the restaurant without asking what I wanted." Things like, "I felt invisible when you didn't notice I got a haircut." These statements sound petty. They sound needy. They sound like something a child would say, not a grown adult. And that's exactly why they're so hard to voice. Because we've been taught that these feelings are invalid, that we should be tougher, more independent, less sensitive. But the irony is that by trying to be mature and not voice these small hurts, we create much bigger problems. We create coldness. We create distance. We create relationships where two people who genuinely love each other can barely stand to be around each other. Now, here's something crucial that doesn't get talked about enough. This only works if both people are willing to participate. Because it's not enough for the cold person to voice their hurts. The other person has to receive those hurts with compassion and without defensiveness. Imagine you finally work up the courage to tell your partner, "I felt hurt when you didn't seem interested in my work story yesterday." And they respond with, "Oh my God, you're so sensitive. I was just tired. You're being ridiculous." What happens? You never speak up again. You learn that your feelings aren't safe with this person. You learn to suppress even more. You go even colder. But imagine instead they say, "I didn't realize that hurt you. Tell me about it now. I want to hear." Suddenly there's safety. Suddenly there's a space where that vulnerable child self can exist without shame or judgment. This is what creates lasting warmth in relationships. Not the absence of hurt, because that's impossible, but the presence of safety to express hurt, no matter how small or seemingly irrational it might be. Let's address something else that's really important. Going cold isn't always a sign that the relationship can be saved. Sometimes coldness is a protection mechanism against something genuinely harmful. If someone goes cold because they're being manipulated, gaslit, or abused, that coldness is their psyche's way of protecting them. If someone goes cold because their partner consistently dismisses their feelings, refuses to change harmful patterns, or violates their boundaries repeatedly, that coldness might be their body's way of preparing them to leave. Coldness in these situations isn't the problem. It's a signal. It's a signal that something is deeply wrong and needs to change, either within the relationship or by ending it. But in relationships where both people genuinely care and want to make things work, coldness is usually a sign of accumulated hurt, not a lack of love. And that's something that can be healed with the right approach. Think about the relationships that last decades, the couples who are still genuinely warm and affectionate after 30, 40, 50 years together. What do they have that others don't? It's not that they never hurt each other. It's not that they're perfectly compatible or never get on each other's nerves. It's that they've created a space where hurts, even tiny ones, can be voiced and addressed before they accumulate into coldness. They've learned to say things like, "I need more affection right now," without shame. They've learned to say, "I felt dismissed earlier and it's still bothering me," without fear. They've learned to receive these statements with curiosity rather than defensiveness. They've essentially learned to parent each other's child selves, not in a patronizing way, but in a nurturing way. They understand that the part of us that loves is also the part of us that's most vulnerable, most easily hurt, and most in need of reassurance. Here's something that might shift your perspective entirely. That coldness you feel or that you're experiencing from your partner, it's not apathy. It's the opposite of apathy. It's actually evidence of how much you care. You don't go cold with people you're indifferent to. You don't accumulate hurts from people whose opinion doesn't matter to you. You don't shut down emotionally with someone you never opened up to in the first place. Coldness is what happens when someone who loves deeply gets hurt repeatedly and doesn't know how to process or express that hurt. It's a protective mechanism, not a lack of feeling. Under that cold exterior is someone who's actually feeling too much, not too little. This is why the coldest people in relationships are often the ones who were once the warmest, the most affectionate, the most willing to be vulnerable. They open themselves up completely, and when those small hurts started accumulating, they had nowhere to go with them. So they shut down. They went cold. Not because they stopped loving, but because loving without safety became too painful. So, if you're the one who's gone cold, understand this. Your feelings aren't invalid just because they seem small.
Your hurt isn't less real just because it came from something that seems insignificant. You deserve to have a partner who creates space for all of your feelings, even the ones that make you feel childish or needy. And if you're with someone who's gone cold, understand this. Their coldness isn't about you being inadequate or them being difficult. It's about accumulated hurt that they likely don't even fully understand themselves. The question isn't why can't they just get over it? The question is, how can I help them feel safe enough to share what's really bothering them? The most revolutionary thing you can do in a relationship is create a space where both people can be emotionally immature sometimes, where it's okay to say, I need reassurance right now, even though I know it's irrational, where it's okay to admit that small thing you did hurt me, even though I know you didn't mean it. Because that's where warmth lives, not in being perfectly mature and rational all the time, but in being vulnerable and honest about our very human need to feel loved, valued, and prioritized by our partners. Relationships aren't boring when you know someone well. They're boring when you stop being curious about what's really going on beneath the surface, when you stop asking the deeper questions, when you stop creating space for authentic expression. And relationships don't fail because people grow apart. They fail because people stop communicating the small things until those small things become an insurmountable wall of coldness. So here's the real question. In your relationship, is there space for the small hurts? Is there room for the irrational feelings? Is there safety for the vulnerable child self that just wants to feel loved and important? Because if there is, warmth isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And if there isn't, well, maybe it's time to create that space, or find someone who will. The coldness isn't the end of love. Sometimes it's just love asking for a safer place to exist.